a bit of a Back to the Future feel on the First in the Nation campaign trail these days as a Kennedy has returned to New Hampshire to run for president. This last week, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. officially entered the race, and he is our guest this morning on Close Up. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kennedy.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
So I usually ask candidates who they are and why they're running, but your family name is so well known that kind of sets that aside. However, there's a younger generation out there, those college students, kids of a certain age who have no living memory of either your father or your two uncles. So to that generation, how do you introduce yourself?
Well, you know, I guess, I suppose what I would do is introduce myself as an environmental attorney and public interest attorney who's worked for 40 years on environmental issues. I helped build the biggest water protection group in the world, Waterkeeper Alliance, and I've worked, you know, more recently on public health issues, and particularly children's health issues. In terms of introducing him to my family, my uncle was the president. I was 7 years old when he was killed in 1963. I went to his convention in 1960, in the summer of 1960 in Los Angeles. I campaigned with my family. I have one of 11 siblings. My father was the campaign manager for my uncle. My father was Robert Kennedy. And then he was the Attorney General during the Kennedy administration and led the battle to, you know, on the civil rights battle, worked with Martin Luther King and then many, many other battles. And then my father ran. My uncle was killed in 1963 when I was 10 years old. And my father ran for Senate in 1964, was elected in New York, and then ran for president in 1968. I was with him when he announced, and I was with him when he died in Los Angeles after being assassinated.
That must have been a searing moment. Does that inform in any way what you do on the campaign trail now?
In what sense?
I guess having been there, having gone through that, witnessed your father's death.
But in what sense?
I mean, anything. How does that inform what you do, I guess?
Well, I mean, I think my father's life was more influential for me than his death. You know, you know, I think one of my most poignant memories, you know, one of the things that I feel is really important now is that we're living in this period of very, very toxic polarization. And my father ran for president against a president of his own party at a time when he was running against a war. And he was running at a time of, you know, probably the worst polarization in American history since the Civil War. And it was, even today, you know, I have Republican friends and Democratic friends, and they talk about this level of polarization and in terms that are apocalyptic. People do not know how it's going to end, and they can't imagine that it's going to end in a good way. And one of the things that my father did, when my father ran for president, he had almost no chance of winning, and he did not believe he could win. He was running against the president of his own party. He had all the labor unions, and he had run his brother's campaign in 1960. But then they had the unions, and they had the Democratic machine behind him. My father had all the labor unions against him, except for the UAW, the United Auto Workers, and then Cesar Chavez's union, United Farm Workers. He had all the liberal newspapers, from the New York Times to the Village Voice, against him. He had all the city mayors, including Mayor Daley, who had played a critical role in 1960, against him. He had his allies from the New Frontier, from my uncle's administration, were now in President Johnson's White House, so they were against him. The Hollywood people, everybody was against him. He had basically poor blacks in cities, Hispanics, Indians on Indian reservation, and poor whites in Appalachia, etc. But otherwise, he had almost no chance of winning. And it allowed him, really, it freed him to just tell the truth. And he started talking the truth. He told Indiana University medical students, when they asked him, who's going to pay for your healthcare program, he said, you are. He told students at Creighton University in Omaha, when they said, when they asked him if he supported draft deferments, He said, no, it's unfair. 45% of the paratroopers in Vietnam are black. And people wanted, the students were very interested in deferments at that time because that's how they were staying out of Vietnam. And he said to them, that's not fair. I can get my kids into college. We shouldn't have a war that's just fought by black kids.
So you're mentioning the long odds, obviously. There's a parallel there to what you're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot happening right now. And I think this war, the Ukraine war right now, we need to really have a debate about that war.
So what would you do as president if you were in the White House right now? Would you be supporting Ukraine in the same way?
On that war, well, here's the thing. We need to know what the mission is. My son fought in that war. My son was a machine gunner with a paratrooper movement. He fought in the Kharkiv offensive. I think the reason Americans support that war is all for the best reasons, because we are a good people, we're compassionate people. We see Ukrainian people suffering from this act of aggression and suffering the savagery. But we were supposed to be there on a humanitarian mission, and Americans support that. President Biden recently said that the reason we're there is regime change in Russia. We're trying to get rid of Putin. And his Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, supported that and said, yeah, we're trying to exhaust the Russian army and degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. Well, if that is our objective, that is the opposite of a humanitarian objective. A humanitarian objective means shortening the war and reducing bloodshed. Those objectives mean lengthening the war and making it a war of attrition.
You mentioned President Biden. What has he done or not done to earn this primary challenge?
Well, let me just finish this. Every act that we've taken over there has prolonged the war. Ukraine has lost 300,000 troops. The commander of the Special Forces has said 80% of the Special Forces troops are dead or wounded and can't be replaced. Ukraine has 60% unemployment, and the Russians are killing Ukrainians at a ratio of 8 to 1. We're putting $113 billion there. We have a middle class in this country that doesn't exist anymore. 57% of Americans now could not put their hand on $1,000 in an emergency. 1/4 of Americans are now going to bed hungry. So we have a crisis here in this country. We have 1.5 million vets who are living in poverty. We have 33,000 who are homeless. We have 23 a day who are committing suicide. We have a war on the poor going on in this country, and we need to spend money here rather than being the policeman of the world.
One of the obstacles you're going to face in this Democratic primary is your activism around vaccines. The medical establishment says that your rhetoric is dangerous and put lives at risk. Is your entry into this race about unseating Joe Biden, or is it about advancing a cause which seems to be your number one issue?
Well, that's my number one issue because the media is saying that. But I've worked on many issues my whole life. I mean, as Tucker Carlson said, pointed out, everything that I said about vaccines that was called misinformation has been now proven, in his words, unequivocally true. I'm not against vaccines. I vaccinated all my children, fully vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated myself, not with the COVID vaccine, but with other vaccines. I'm not anti-vaccine. I just want vaccines that work, that are properly tested, that keep people healthy, where if you look at a placebo group and you look at a vaccinated group, the people who are vaccinated are going to be more likely to be alive and healthy in 5 years than the people in the placebo group. And unfortunately, that is not true for these vaccines.
Parallel to the vaccine discussion, you make a point about censorship in saying that the more that people try to suppress a certain viewpoint, the more poisonous that is to civic life in America. Where do you draw the line between what is important and appropriate civic and public discourse and fringe conspiracy theories being treated seriously? For instance, the QAnon conspiracy theory has a tangent that involves your family that's ludicrous, but people in that conspiracy theory could be attracted to your candidacy. So if that happens, what are you going to do?
Well, your question about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects conspiracy theories. The First Amendment protects things that are untrue. The Constitution was written for hard times. And the remedy for bad speech is more speech. It's not cutting people off. Once you give the government the power to silence its critics, it then has license to commit any atrocity. And the whole core, the whole foundation stone of American democracy is that we get to talk to each other about anything that we want. We get to criticize our government. And what we now know about the censorship program that the White House was operating, and the CIA and the FBI with Twitter and with the other social media companies, is that they had no concern about whether things were true or not. What they were using the term misinformation as a euphemism for any statement that departed from government orthodoxies, whether it was true or not. And that's the problem. When you give government the power to silence its critics, there's no end to that. We just can't let that happen.
We're running short on time here, but will you open yourself to the cross-examination of the people? Do the town halls, take all the questions here in New Hampshire?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we appreciate your time on Close Up. We'll see you out there on the trail.
Thank you, Adam.
All right.